What's up, guys? This morning I went up to Buena Park, California for the SoCal All Rotary event, obviously. It's my first time going to an actual just only Rotary event in California or anywhere for that matter. And man, I just wanted to speak on it a little bit. First of all, thank you to SoCal All Rotary. What an awesome event. So it was basically held at a public park. They used the parking lot for all the cars. Definitely kind of made me reflect on what a great community we have in the automotive space. You know, everybody's got their JDM, their American Muscle, their Euro, whatever crowds, but I will say that I've been in the Euro crowd, I've been in the JDM scene, I've been around a lot of different genres of vehicles. The Rotary community is incredible. I did get a taste of it working for Mad Mike and traveling with him and seeing all the diehards that came out of the woodwork to the events to say hi and stuff. But man, to actually now own my own FD and Rotary car and going to my first event, I was welcomed with open arms. I saw a few familiar faces there, which was cool, but I met a ton of new people today. And I think most importantly, I was welcome. That was cool. I felt like I belonged there right out of the gate, and I learned a lot today from these people. What a sharing group of folks. Most of the folks were familiar with my project, which was a little flattering and cool all at the same time. And quite a few of them actually offered help and support, which was so cool. Let's get on to the video at hand here. As you can see, my 1993 Mazda RX-7 is sitting here, still not operating under its own power yet. I did, as you guys saw, get the gas tank done. It's sitting back there in the background, and we'll be reinstalling that maybe today, this afternoon as well. But I want to move on to the battery relocation. And the reason I'm going to relocate the battery is because in RX-7s, when you go to a single turbo setup or a V-mount setup, a lot of times the intercooler piping needs that space to be routed right where the battery goes. And these cars have a unique, I'll show it to you guys, but they have a unique fuse box, a fuse panel, that actually has the positive ring terminal on it that goes on your battery. So when you relocate the battery, you basically have to remount that fuse panel. You remove the ring terminal off it, which is a very simple process by just taking off two 10mm bolts and it just pops off. But then you have to reroute your wiring. So we'll go through all that and show you guys how to do that. I also want to show you guys all the parts you'll need so that you can go purchase those beforehand and potentially even the tools that you're going to need. I've laid it all out on the toolbox already. So we'll go over and look at that as well. So yeah, let's do this. All right, so let's run over to the toolbox. I've laid out some of the tools and the bits that you'll need to do a relocation on your battery, and also have the engine bay popped so I can show you guys exactly what I'm doing in there as well. So here we go. What I've done is I've picked up a new battery. When you do a battery relocation, I think it's very important to always use a full-size battery. A lot of times guys will go to a racing style battery or a very small motorcycle battery. Those racing batteries or motorcycle batteries, once they drain, a lot of times you can't bring them back. You have much better luck with a large battery, a full-size battery, especially if you're running an audio system, an air system for your air suspension, whatever. Definitely a full-size battery is the way to go. So if I can do a full-size battery in a relocation, I will always do a full-size battery. Just a little hint or tip from me to you. Also, another little tip or hint, battery cable, 2-gauge. I run 2-gauge on all my battery relocations. I did it on this one, and I'm doing it on mine. A little tip or life hack for this, do not buy automotive 2-gauge wire or stereo wire. It's stupid expensive. When I bought the stuff for TJ's car, we paid almost $5 a foot. I purchased 20 feet of, this is 20 feet of wire here, and it's enough to do everything I need on the car and then have some extra. You always want to buy a little more than you need in case you make a mistake or you need some down the line, you got it in your toolbox. So my tip or trick is do not buy automotive wiring or car audio wiring. Purchase welding wire. Go to a welding supply store. These wires are very, they're well wound in here, and the shielding is very flexible. So these are meant for like extending a welding setup so that you can reach further and stuff like that. But this is very good wire. It's called Flexiprene heavy duty welding cable. And this was $1.48 a foot. And again, I bought 20 feet, so you can do the math, but that is the way to go. And if you're going to be moving the battery into a place where there never was a battery before, you're gonna want some way to hold it down. I just picked up one of these universal tie downs. Basically it has 2 rods that are threaded and some wing nuts. You mount 2 holes in the chassis, you run these through, and this goes over top of the battery, and you tighten it down and you're all set. I also bought this top post battery cable, which is for the negative side. You can always build your own negative cable with this and some ring terminals, but I bought this one just because it was easier. It's already crimped from the factory. Not sure if you can see that or not, but I'll go ahead and put that on the negative side and ground that to the chassis. Ring terminals are very important. I bought 2 different sizes. I've got a bigger hole and a smaller hole size. I've used the smaller hole on this grounding cable that I already made. And I also already made the power wire, so I've used the small hole ones. I've got a few of these extra. Again, I'm kind of an overdoer, and if they've got a couple extra, I'll buy 2 or 3 extras just so in case it's late and I need it. Our shop doesn't happen to be by any AutoZones or any auto parts stores in general. It's a bit of a drive, so I always buy a couple extra of everything. That way I have it if I need it. If not, I throw it in a toolbox. At some point I'm probably going to want to have it. So on top of that, you have some heat shrink tubing on hand, because I like to heat shrink tube whenever I do a connection, so that no water and stuff can get into the seam between the fitting and the wire. So I'll always shrink tube, so you need a heat gun or cigarette lighter for that. These are 2 tools that you'll want to have handy. These are crimper cutters. These are cutters. In the drawer I also keep a pair of zip tie cutters, because you are going to want to zip tie the wire, your new power wire and ground wires, to existing locations in the car. These little flush cuts, you can buy an expensive pair from a number of different brands, but basically these allow you to cut a zip tie flush after you pull it tight. That way when you reach your hands back down in the engine bay or wherever you've mounted something, you don't cut your hands, the back of your hands and stuff on the sharp plastic. So for me, those are a must-have. I pretty much use those the most out of any tool that I have in my toolbox probably. So anyway, let's move on to the engine bay here. So this is where the battery used to reside. There used to be a battery tray that mounted on this hole and then this hole up here. And so the battery would sit here long ways. And this is the fuse box I was telling you guys about. So this is our main fuse, our headlamp fuse, our EGI fuse, the retractor, I believe, for the headlights, and then I'm not sure what B2 is. At any rate, this fuse panel is very important. It has some large fuses in it. 120 amp for the starting system and the battery system, basically your main fuse. And then the rest are 30s and 40s. But this used to hang on the side of the battery, like I was saying. It used this terminal here that actually this is the battery terminal that bolted onto this panel here, this piece. And this piece actually mounted on the side right here. So then it would clip onto the battery. Since the battery is no longer there, you don't need those pieces. So I remove those. And what I'll do is I'll actually put this fuse panel, I'll put the cover back on it, and I'll actually mount this fuse panel over here. Now on TJ's car, I moved this one and this one under the headlight down to here. But on my car, since I'm keeping the pop-ups, yes, I'm keeping the pop-ups, there's no room to put them under there. So this will stay here and get hard mounted for now. When I go back and redo this car down the road, I'll probably move all those to a better location and make it a little more tidy. But for now, I just want to get the car started. So getting a good battery in the car, getting the power system up to snuff is key. Getting the fuel tank back in the car and getting that running and working, and getting the fuel lines flushed out are my #1 priorities right now. I'm also going to go ahead and scab the 4 fuel injectors out of TJ's old 13B that we took out of the white car and put those in here, because the fuel tank was so bad. If it was pumping that fuel with all that rust through it, it's a good chance that the fuel injectors are probably clogged and the fuel lines could even be clogged. So get the tank back in, flush the fuel lines, change the fuel injectors, put in a new fuel pump, get the battery hooked up, and we should be able to start the car. So today we're going to take a big step in that direction, get this battery going. And so I've gone ahead and put the battery in the car in the location where it's going to be mounted. This is a rear seat area basically for these cars. Now in the US we never got a rear seat. We just got, oh hey, guess that wasn't supposed to be open. In the US we only got a rear cubby area that goes here. So there's two bins that lift up behind the front passenger and driver seats. I'm going to go ahead and mount this battery in a location where the passenger cubby is. This will be covered by a plastic casing that has a flip up lid where you can access the battery. I will trim the front of it out so that this full-size battery can fit, and you will never see it once the interior is all put back in the car. So I've got this situated so that the positive cable's over here and the negative cable is on the driver's side. I've already made the negative terminal cable with the kit that I showed you earlier. It's mounted here to where the seatbelt mounts go for these cars in the Japanese market when they have a rear seat. They are not used in this car. You can see they have a plug in this one over here. I've removed the plug, scraped off the paint, mounted the negative terminal here, and this will mount right there when it's done. So right now I just have it sitting off the side, and then the positive cable is here. I've already routed it to save time, but it routes along with another wire that goes to the other side of the car. I've gone ahead and drilled a 3/4 inch hole for our 1/2 inch welding wire to go out the bottom of the chassis. That way it's sealed and we can't get any water in the car. It then goes underneath the car, and I will put the car in the air and show you guys, but it goes under the car, it runs up to the starter. So let me show you that. Alright, so here's the underside of the car. I wanted to go ahead and show you, these are the holes that I created for the battery mounts, the arms that actually reach to the bottom of the chassis and clip on. These go up the side of the battery, and then you put the wing nut on that and it secures the battery in the tray. That's in. I wanted to show you guys where the power wire comes out of the chassis. So what I did was I drilled a hole in the drain plug here in the bottom of the seat pan, inserted a grommet for a 1/2 inch hole, and ran my wire here. I went ahead and removed these covers. These are like skid plate covers that cover up your fuel lines as they run down the chassis to the front of the car, to the engine. I went ahead and took those off because what I want to do is I want to use these as structure for this power wire. So as you can see, this is run up against the chassis. I've gone ahead and zip tied this 2-gauge wire to the fuel lines, and then it goes right over here to the starter. And what I've done is the isolator is moved back, but I have it basically coupled right into the starter. Then the starter wire goes up to that up to the alternator and the main fuse that I told you about. We'll go ahead and, it's always good to cover up these positive terminals, so we'll go ahead and zip tie this isolator over top of the power wire there, and that will be nice and sealed. This leaves me to put the covers back on. And once those covers are on, you won't even know that power cable's there, which is really cool to me. We did this on TJ's car as well. I'll kind of show you here. These are the covers I was speaking of right here. TJ's undercarriage is much cleaner than mine, but not only do we have his power wire running in there, you can see the red wire underneath. All of his air lines for his air system are in there, and so is all the fuel lines. So it really cleans up the bottom of the car, and it gives it a bit of protection as well. Even though those covers are only plastic, it will save your ass if you hit something or whatever on the road. So yeah, so pumped on how this is turning out. I'm gonna go ahead and put the covers back on over the fuel lines and bury that. Now that this is all hooked up, all I gotta do is actually power it to the battery now, and we should have power in the system, so that's great. This is pretty much a done deal. The next step for this process would be to finish the rear tray where the battery goes, make that cut, put that in, but since I'm gonna be removing the carpet and the dashboard from this car, I'm not gonna put that piece back in yet. I can go ahead and show you what it looks like. If you guys are familiar with FDs, this is basically the panel, and this is where the rear seat goes. These buckets reach down into where your rear seat pad would be, and this is what I was telling you about cubbies. So basically these are bins that are covered. Now my battery will be under that one, but what I'm gonna have to do is trim out some of this material here so that the battery sits in there nice and doesn't make contact with any of this plastic. I've already done TJs, so I know exactly where to cut it. And when you have that thing back in the car, you don't even know the battery's there unless you open the lid. And if I cut it right, like I did on TJs, when you open the lid, there's still plastic that goes down behind the battery and everything. It looks so good when it's done. So now that that's kind of finished, I can move on to mounting this fuel cell. So I'm gonna go ahead and get that back in the car. I've got to put the filler neck back on it, but the tank is here. I am gonna repaint the tank before I put it back in. I think that's always a must when you do something like this. As you can see, I wasn't very tidy. I spilled a bit of the sealer on the tank. So once I paint it, that'll all go away. But it's hard to see in here. But I'm pretty impressed with how this turned out. So it looks like it has drips. All those look like drips or whatever, but that's actually hardened. I'll try to show you, but it's tough. It's actually hard now. It's not wet anymore. Before it was like liquid. And once it hardens, it coats the aluminum in there, or coats the steel in there. Yeah, so this tank is basically good as new now. Pretty pumped with the way it turned out. I will say, it was a pain in the ass, but it did save me 400 bucks. So in the end, I think I'm okay with it. It also, you know, gives me an opportunity to do something on the car I've never done before. I've never had to do that. So for me, the more I can learn, the better. I'm no expert. I'll be the first to tell you that. I've learned and am learning just like the rest of you guys. I just like to share what I'm doing. And this has been a great learning curve for me, fixing a fuel tank. So as I mentioned in a previous video, I did get the new fuel carrier as well. So this actually mounts inside the tank here. You kind of angle it in and that goes down and bolts in. So this one looks kind of shitty on the outside. My other one looked better than this, but what matters is in here. This is all still very fresh and nice. So I'll go ahead and put a new fuel pump on here. Once the fuel pump's here and that's on, I'll go ahead and put it back in the tank. But for now, the tank's going in and we'll bolt that in later. All right, boys and girls, so the battery's done, gas tank's back in. It's been a long day. I'm gonna call it a day here. Make sure you subscribe because in tomorrow's episode, we're gonna try to start the car.